Hi, everybody. My name is Larcine. I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. And I guess we're going to start a little bit early because it's an Al-Anon meeting, okay? And if we're nothing else, we're always ready, right? My topic for this meeting is what is in my God box. And when I initially got that, I was like, I don't got a God box. So, and God could never fit in the box anyway. And I don't think there's a box big enough for me to put all the things that I want to give over to God into that God box. And I remember really when God boxes were really super popular, in the 80s or something, and asking my sponsor about, well, what's exactly is a God box? And she says, that's just a tricky way of getting you to work step 3, without you knowing it. So to me, when I think about, it's what am I turning over? What am I letting go and letting God? That is what my interpretation of, of what that is. And I remember the very first time I think I actually turned it over to God. And I was having one of those days with my husband. And he was like, I knew something was wrong, but he wasn't copping to what it was. And so we had that, what's wrong? Nothing. What's wrong? Nothing. That's just on for, however long that went on. And I called my sponsor to report his behavior. And I remember her saying, she just said, just turn him over to God. Just let God have him and his problem. And so she said, repeat after me, God, I'm turning Butch over to you. And so I said it and I hung up. And about, I'm in the kitchen doing dishes, and about, 2 minutes later, Butch walks in. Now he wants to talk. And whoa, this really works. And, but again, I said, sorry, I talked to Jeannie. She told me to turn you over to God, so now you got to go talk to God for what's ever bugging you, because I'm out. And, and it works so well. I thought that, and again, this is just you give it to God and he makes it work out the way that you want it to. Because again, I just got this like instant gratification or whatever, because I was still really new and I still want things the way that I want them, and how I want them. And, and I remember then, many, many years later, and I'm like maybe 15 years in the program, and I found out that I was going to be a grandma. And I'd never been a grandma before. I was very, very excited about that. And I'm a real, I like to make all this, how this is going to look and what it's going to look like. And I made this list. And number 1 on the list is I must be there when the baby's born. And so I have that on my list and everything else. And my husband says to me, because I have a lot of commitments, the baby's due in May. And I have like commitments almost every weekend in May. He says, you may want to get out of some of those commitments. Because what if, the baby's born on the weekend, and I'm just like, well, I'm not getting out of those commitments. Those are Al-Anon commitments. I'm keeping them. And he said, well, then you might not be here when the baby's born. So let me tell you, when the alcoholic is the voice of reason in your house, you are in more trouble than you even know, okay? And he suggested that I talk to my sponsor about that. And, and I'm not going to do that because, as we all know, sponsors are plan busters, okay? They're not fun. And I certainly didn't tell my home group because they're just going to rat me out to my sponsor, so that's not going to work. So I gave it to God, and when I say I gave it to God, what I said was, God, I do a lot of service. And it would just be really nice if this baby's just not born on the weekend, okay? Just not a Friday, Saturday thing, okay? I can even deal with Sunday because I'll be back on Sunday, but just not Friday, Saturday. And I remember doing that. I remember giving it to God. I remember God nodding his head affirmative. It was beautiful. It was just beautiful, and I never worried about a thing. And I did all these commitments, and I had my last commitment in May. I called my daughter-in-law. Thursday night, nothing's happening. She's fine. Friday night, I'm in this faraway place, only one plane in and out, someplace in one of the Dakotas or something like that. It's Friday night, it's the dinner. My husband calls me, and the baby has been born. And I was pissed off, people. I'm really, 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 really angry, and because God has let me down big time. And I remember being at these dinner, and they're, oh, we're so happy you're here. And I'm like, I hate you people, And of course, that's not, that's what's on the inside. On the outside is, oh, yes, wonderful, Al-Anon. But I excuse myself from the dinner. I go out and I call Carol. Carol's my sponsor at that time, and I start yelling and screaming at her. I asked God for one little weeny baby not to be born in the weekend. And do I get it? No. It's just, and when do you get to be there for your family? This sucks. I'm quitting Al-Anon, and I'm just garbage, barfing all over the place on her. And I'll never forget because she said, I'll have to call you back. Oh, thank you. Thank you for being there for me, you know. I mean, God's let me down, and here's my sponsor. I'm right in line with God. And I don't think it was 2 minutes later, and my cell phone rang. And it was my sponsor. And let me tell you, when your sponsor calls you, you have crossed the line, okay? They're bringing in the big guns to reel your butt back in. And I knew better than to yell at her. So I started crying. I just wanted to be there when the baby's born. It's not fair. It's my first time being a grandma. And I remember her saying, and at that time, Charlotte was Carol's sponsor. And Charlotte said to me, you know, Larcine, a beautiful, beautiful thing just happened today. And just because you made some ridiculous rule in your head about how this wonderful thing is supposed to be, you know, are you going to turn it into this big pile of garbage just because it didn't go down the way that you wanted it to go down? You've become a grandma. And this baby is healthy and the mom is healthy. Everything is just as it should be. And God has you exactly where you're supposed to be doing exactly what you are supposed to be doing. And I remember telling Charlotte, never mind, because I know. I know. I get, I know, but again, I always say knowing and doing are two very, very different things in this program. And you come a lot, you get to know a lot, but are you doing it? And it gets really confusing sometimes when you really want something so desperately, and you think that that's the only way, that this can happen, that this can be happy. Because I remember when that baby was born, I mean, my husband's giving me blow by blow of everything, and I'm like, don't let anybody touch that baby. Nobody look at that baby. It's just absolute insanity. Absolute insanity. So what does it mean when I turn something over to God? What does that really look like? Am I really just going, God, here, you take this? And sometimes, and I always think, I had a son that drank a lot and did a lot of drugs and was in a lot of trouble a lot. And I was very, very concerned for this child. And of course, I prayed for him all the time, every day. I mean, he was always in my prayers, but it got to the point where, what I had to do was I just had to accept, what God taught me is that I just get to love this kid where he is, because we're just living one day at a time. Anything can happen to anybody in any given moment, good or bad or whatever. What do you want to do? Do you want to be worrying all the time? Or do you just want to remember how much you love him and let him know that? But unacceptable behavior is unacceptable behavior. And God's given me a choice day after day about what I'm going to do. And I always thought when I was turning my son over, what I was thinking was, and what I'm putting in that God box, what I'm asking God to do, can you please get my son sober? That used to be my prayer all the time. And stuff. But I thought that was my prayer. But what was really going on that I didn't know was what I was really doing was telling God, I'm so afraid. What's going to happen to me if something happens to my kid? And once I start looking at that, there's something I can do about how I'm feeling and what I'm afraid of. I can't do anything else about anybody's sobriety or what that's going to look like or if it's going to happen. But my fear, those are the kinds of things. That's what I'm turning over to God. I don't know. I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know what's going to happen. But God, please help me not to be so afraid. Because when I'm not so afraid, then I can love you just like you are, accept you just for who you are, and get the shot at being happy, joyous, and free. Because that's what Al-Anon gives me every day, gives me the opportunity to be happy, joyous, and free. But I'm the person that has to take the shot. And here are the tools. Here's a God that's always at our disposal. And so when I don't know what to do, when I am afraid, I just give it to God, and let him do what he needs to do with it. And when I do that, sometimes I'm thinking, how big of you, Larcine, to turn this person's life over to God? It's just kind of like, and I remember sharing the story one time, about, my grandson being born and about how I turned it over to God. And, Carol said, I want to be really clear with you that you did not turn anything over to God. What you did that day was be God. That's really what was on the thing. And I remember reading a book not so long ago, and it said, you know what the difference is between you and God? And yes, I want to know what the difference is between me and God. And it says, God never thinks he's you. And it's a really, it's an absolutely, because that's what I do. I'm playing God when I think I know what's best for you and what you should do and how you should do it. And what I want to do is what God wants me to do, and that's just to love you and accept you for who you are and what you are. And hope that you'll come along the path just as I've come along the path. Hope that you'll know the happiness and joy that I have known, because it's available. It's just whether or not you accept that grace in your life, because it's available to everybody who walks the planet. And for today, it's, what's in my, God box, what am I turning over to God every day? It's just my sadness. Because my husband, it'll be 2 years in July at the end of the month since my husband's passed away. And it's been sadness every day. I'm not going to pretend it's not. And I was skipping down the road of happy destiny here. There's been a lot of sadness every day, and just sadness because I miss him so very much. God's my compass, but my husband was always my North Star. And, I'm always coming back to him always keeping me in the now, because I'm a planner. I like to plan, where this is going on. I'm always like a week ahead, a month ahead or whatever. We're going here, we're going there, we're doing this. What's our retirement going to look like? I'm the one that does all of that. Butch's idea of planning is what's for lunch. That's, so he makes sure we have lunch. I make sure we have retirement benefits, and it worked out. And now I don't have my North Star bringing me back to the moment. And so it's like, and I'm having to learn to do that on my own. And I don't do it on my own because I ask God to help me stay in the moment. So I walk every morning and I say I walk every morning and I walk by myself, but I don't, because there's always 17 voices in my head that start on the journey with me. And that's the whole idea of me walking for an hour and a half, is to start to clear out those voices, so that I can do my prayer and then listen for God. And what he would have me do and how he would have me get through this sadness, because he knows I'm upset and he knows I'm sad. And then not so long ago, just a few months ago, when I was walking, one of the last voices that was still in there said, "You know what, Larcine, you're never going to be happy again." And it startled me. Just, it's just like, whoa. And I stopped dead where I was walking and I said out loud, "Oh my God, am I never going to be happy again?" And I wasn't praying, but apparently because I said, "Oh my God," God thought I was praying, because the next thing I heard was Larcine. And when I hear God, he always calls me Larcine. He just addresses me so I know it's him. And he said, "Larcine, you're just going to have to find a different happy." Because there's always an answer. There's always a solution. There's always something, But I have to find the different happy. God's not going to hit me with the happy wand. I have to find a different happy. Happiness is an inside job. I believe that with every fiber of my being. It's been my experience my whole entire life. So now my job is to find a different happy. So every day I ask God to show me a different happy. And the other day, my friend Chris, she made me go on a bike ride. I haven't been on a bike in like 30 years. And I don't know if it was happy. My butt was not happy, but we did see some wonderful things, and we did do something, but I'll tell you, when I first got on that bike and I actually got going, I was 6 years old again, learning to ride a bike for the first time, and then that's how I kind of look at my life now. Again, I'm just getting on the bike, learning how to ride again. And so I give that to God, and I know that he'll show me the way to go. And I hope that he shows you the way to go. And I just want to read something out of our literature. This was yesterday's reading out of our ODAT. And it says, today's reminder. And it says, God will take a hand in my life if I ask for his guidance and keep myself receptive to indications of his will for me. Before Al-Anon, I took too much on myself in trying to engineer solutions. Now I know I can only make right decisions by referring my problems to him. God must be part of my life. I will acknowledge him in all my ways. Then it will be possible to rise above my difficulties. And the quote from Martin Buber is, God dwells wherever man lets him in. So with that, I am going to open it up. You are welcome to come up to the microphone and share. And my friend Lynn is going to be your timer. So in order to allow as many people to share as possible, there's a 2-minute share thing. So thank you for letting me.